Hello and welcome back to Value Raters Class Act, streaming live here on YouTube, 7 o'clock every Thursday. Well, thanks for joining me, and you know what's coming next. Yeah, before we get underway, if you can give us that thumbs up, that would be great. And also, if you haven't already, to subscribe to the channel, completely free. Just notify you every time that we've got a video and we're going live. We're obviously very time sensitive here, so I'd hate you to miss any content at all. So what's on the show this week? Well, we got a bit of a treat. After we've looked at Sandown, make sure you stick around, because last week, if you remember, we met Andy Ayres, who's a journalist that writes for us from the Sun newspaper, a paddock expert. He, well, myself and him a couple of years ago, we met up at Bath Racecourse to do some filming live around the paddock, how to identify winners. If you haven't seen it, it's an absolute must watch, and that's coming towards the end of the show after we've looked at Sandown. It's a good watch. Make sure you stick around for that. So, of course, this weekend, Sandown Park for the Coral Eclipse is the headline on Saturday. But before that, we've got a support card on Friday also at Sandown, which I've been poring over the form this afternoon. It's got to be said, well, certainly my opinion of the card, even though it's full of interest, I didn't think there's really many punting angles at all, really. We've got quite small fields. We've got some 2-year-old races. We've got you've got a listed race which has got small fields. I just thought it was full of interest. But there is one race that hopefully I've identified that hopefully we'll find some value, and it's actually a race that intrigues me. So let's go straight over and look at this. Let's just share the screen with you. Let's start off with, as we always do, looking at the weather. Let me just pop that. There we are. Let me just pop that on there. So Sandown Park, as you can see, at the moment they are calling the ground good to soft on the course that we've going to be looking at, which is run over 1.6 miles. But you can see today, you know, they've had some really good temperatures there, and tomorrow much the same, really. They forecast a bit of a light shower if you look sort of early afternoon, but I'd be surprised if we're not going to be looking at good ground. That's the workings out I've done today. I'm assuming that it will dry out enough. It will be drying conditions. One thing's for sure is it will dry out all the time. Let me just do a couple of bits here, and when we can get on with it. Okay, so there's a weather forecast. I think it's going to be good ground myself. Let's go over and look again, familiarize ourselves with what we're looking at on Friday at Sandown. Lovely track. If you haven't been, we'll be looking at the race, the 1.6 miles race, which is actually, I think it's the 440. Let me just double check that. Yeah, it's the 440 race we'll be looking at the 1.6 miles start here, which is just by the stands. And from the word go, they're uphill, round the bend, uphill, and then they start going downhill for a little bit there, down the back straight, turn into the straight. Lowest part of the track is here, and then it is uphill. So you really need to stay. Yeah, a 1.6 miles race here, even on good ground. You know, I would want to be looking for a horse that in your mind you think, well, you know, really will stay 2 miles there. But we are, I say, officially they're calling it good to soft, but I just got a feeling that we'll be looking more at good ground. So let's get over to the race, which is the 440. Come up here, and as we can see, it's the Davis Group handicap 0 to 85 and ran over 1.6 miles. It's a class 4 event in name. I think it's a good class 4 myself. First of all, let's just check the pace angle as always here, and we're predicting an even gallop we can see here that a lot of the runners like to be prominent. By the way, as always, I'm using GG's gold toolbox. If anyone's interested in looking at GG's, there's a link in the description. You can try it for £1 for the first 28 days or 30 days. I can't remember which way around it is actually. But as we can see with this race, there's a lot of horses that do prominent. I actually, even though the pace prediction is even, I wouldn't be surprised whether there might be a couple of horses that actually want to just go on and lead. I think there might be a little bit more pace to the race, and I'll explain my reasoning for that in a minute. So I think we're going to get a bit of pace on. So obviously we need to stay our trips really well. Okay, where should we start? Well, let's start with the favourite in the race, which no doubt, and as you can see currently around the 15 to 8 mark, is Classic Lord of Andrew Bolden's, a 3-year-old, now meeting older horses in this handicap. Now, without a doubt, Classic Lord for me has the best form in the race. There's no doubt about that. We saw the horse last time at Chester, over shorter actually. It was over a mile and a half. Another stride the horse would have won. It was probably an inadequate test of stamina at Chester on good to firm ground. You know, it's like a, you know, you need like greyhounds running around there. And another yard it would have won. There's something that's happened this afternoon actually. The winner of the race, Side Shot, actually won very well at Haydock this afternoon, really franking this form, because the race at Haydock this afternoon actually looked on paper beforehand, looked very competitive, but it really bolted up, which again gives this form some really good substance really. Previous to that at Haydock, the horse on heavy ground over a mile and a half. I watched this race back, and again the horse really did need every yard of that, and that was on heavy ground, so clearly stays a mile 4 very well. The $1 million question is, of course, the horse is now stepping up in distance to a mile 6. I've been through the breeding of the horse. There's basically no clues, you know, on the breeding. The horse is Father Shear haven't really tried, or there's no data to gather about whether the horse will stay. The visual impression is when you watch the horse running over a mile and a half, I say we're talking Haydock and Chester, you think visually, well, it'll probably get it, but probably getting it and really getting it a mile 6 at Sandown, I just couldn't be sure. And at the price of 15 to 8, I think we've got to look elsewhere. And not only that, yes, I think that the horse, if this was a 3-year-old race, which of course it's not, because there's older horses in here, you know, it would probably deserve to be even shorter. But the fact of the matter is, it's got to take on older horses. It's now up in trip on a really stiff track. Form looks good. Look, it's been well found in the market, and it'll probably shorten even further once people really cotton on to what's happened this afternoon. But I think it's one to take on. But there's obviously, it's got every chance and deserves to be favourite. The Alan King horse, which is 6 to 1 in the market, the one down the bottom, another 3-year-old here. Wasn't sure what to make of this horse really. Done it well enough in the end last time at Wolverhampton. Took a little bit of time to get going, but was impressive at the line. This form really has not worked out at all. There's been 3 runs out of it, as you can see here. Nothing's won, nothing's placed. The Nottingham form, not too bad. I don't know. Up in trip, again, stamina not insured, even though the horse did stay out the trip very well at Wolverhampton. I don't know. I certainly thought that Classic Lord's form was, you know, miles in front of it, really. But of course, this horse could improve, but it wasn't really for me at that price. Interesting. I mentioned about where I felt that there could be a bit more pace, on where we've got an even prediction, where I thought there might be something that might really go on. This Dancing Harry's down in grade. This 4-year-old ran at Goodwood last time at 2 miles. They went from the front, quickened it up and had a lot of horses in trouble. In the end, it weakened inside the final furlong. I thought it was interesting, this horse coming back to a mile 6, whether they adapt similar tactics. What we do know about Sandown is that it does prefer, front runners do very well at the track. Dancing Harry certainly travels through his races that should be a lot better than his handicap mark, which he runs off tomorrow of 78. I suppose it's a little bit disappointing when you look through some of his previous runs that he isn't managing really to win, and the mention of gradually weakened seems to appear in a lot of his runs. I wouldn't be surprised if they went right forward with him, just on what happened last time at Goodwood, because at the 2-pole he had him beat really, and I thought he was just interesting that then he might be a pace angle. On balance, I don't want to invest in him, but he might well be one that goes forward here. He's not without hope. I couldn't rule him out, the horse at all. He's definitely some kind of a runner in here. What was we left with? Now, the two that, well, the one I'll get straight into now because it's the one that I'll be very interested in, and this is this Dance to Paris. Very interesting jockey booking. Ryan Moore, he doesn't ride for Mrs. L. Leyden. Well, he certainly hasn't. If we look at the jockey, there's no mention of them teaming up recently at all. These two, I think it's a really interesting booking. Now, this horse has got some course form here last time. I'll bring that form up. I prepared it earlier. Sounds like Blue Peter, doesn't it? This was the race that it ran in last time. Now, interestingly, Dance to Paris was beaten by General Zoff, who also is going to be running in this race on Friday. Now, Dance to Paris was drawn 10 in this race, over course and distance, on good to firm ground, which is probably quicker ground. Now, there was a lot of pace in that race, and from being out wide, they attempted to obviously be up with a pace, but because there was plenty of pace on from the lower numbers, couldn't really get there. And Dance to Paris found itself having to go wide round the first bend and was just caught out wide, but was up with the pace. When they turned into the home straight, because there was so much pace on, the other horses that were up with the pace actually started to drop away. And I thought it was impressive that Dance to Paris was still there, basically on the bridle when they were backpedaling, and was still maintaining the gallop to the line. Now, tomorrow, the horse is drawn better. It's got a lower draw, which is drawn in 2. This horse does like to go forward. I just thought the horse had to use plenty of itself in the first couple of furlongs and couldn't even get there in the end, and then was caught out wide. And as I said, all the horses that finished in the frame of this race, including the winner, General Zoff. Now, General Zoff came from the back of the field, couldn't go the early gallop, and obviously benefited from a pace collapse, came from the back of the field. That's perhaps why I'm going to overlook General Zoff here under these conditions. Admittedly, even though Dance to Paris should be better off at the weight she would think, it's actually not, because it had a £3 claimer on that day. And obviously with Ryan Moore taking over, actually Dance to Paris is no better off in the weights. But I just think with those early exertions of trying to get a position from the wide draw, I think it will still hold Generals off. And I'm just going to take that on Generals off, because I think last time things really fell for it. And as I said, couldn't go the early gallop and came from last to first, really. But there's a lot to like about this Dance to Paris. He clearly stays very well. I mean, previous to that was at Chester. This wasn't a bad run. It was in Class 3, been off the track for a while, might have needed that, was no price at all, 40 to 1. With the visor on, was beating 4.5 lengths, had the run of the race. This horse does like to be forward. And the horse has got plenty of good all-weather form as well. And I've noticed some form over 2 miles. So the horse, clearly stays very well. 9:13, it might be vulnerable to the likes of the 3-year-old Classic Lord if it stays. But I just thought at 8 to 1 for Dance to Paris, I thought that looked a good bet. I thought myself, I put it in at 5 to 1. It's now 8-1. Dance with Paris would certainly do for me. And I just think that it's really the angle what happened last time. As I said, you know, did remarkably well from the wide draw up with that gallop, which was a strong gallop, and the rest folded. And all the horses that finished basically in the places, they all came from off the pace. And Dance to Paris was the only horse that maintained it with that fast gallop from the wide draw. So that is definitely going to do for me in this race, Dance to Paris. And even though General's off, what did he carry, 9-6 against 9-13, I just got a feeling this General's off. Might have been a little bit flattered last time, Kemper, as I said, from last to first. But it's an interesting, intriguing little race where Classic Lord is going to be, for me, over bet, especially when they cotton onto that form line that's gone in this afternoon. But again, 3-year-old, it's got to take on older horses. You know, all its form at the moment is mixed up in 3-year-old form. We've got to see how much the horse has got in hand against the elder horses. So let's just have a quick look at odds checker. Dance to Paris, generally see 8-1, 3 places. Paddy Power at the moment. Betfair, Bet Victor. All I would say about Dance to Paris is if you are thinking of investing, personally, I'm going to be waiting till tomorrow. I'm just going to make sure that ground does dry out to good ground. I got caught out at Sandown last time. I was absolutely sure because of the weather, and it turned out to be slower, the ground. I'll just wait until the first race myself, and providing the horse is still priced at 6-1 or bigger, I'll back it. But I just want to check the ground, because if the ground was good to soft, I would have a problem backing Dance to Paris. I really want, you know, good ground, really. Good ground, good to firm ground, it'd be fine. But whether it can actually show its best on good to soft, I wouldn't be so sure about that. So I'm just going to hang fire a little bit, as I'm not the best weatherman, but I think it will be. I think it will be good ground for that there. Let me just see. By the way, if you've got any comments, let us know what you fancy at the weekend at Sandown. Doesn't have to be on Friday, but Saturday. And Glenn's just messaged to say hi, everyone. If you want to leave us a message, tell us your fancies. We would love to hear from you. Right, so there's a selection for you on Friday at Sandown. Looking forward to that race. But as promised, Andy Ayres, who writes for us, we met up at Bath. I was doing principal partner at Bath Racecourse a couple of years ago, and they kindly allowed us to bring a film crew. And it was filmed live before one of the races that actually Andy sponsored on behalf of Value Rater. I'm going to play you out with that. It's well worth sticking around for. It's great insight if you haven't seen it. And I'll be back next week at 7 p.m.
We're around the paddock with Andy Ayres here. Now, Andy, we're at the races, we're stood in the paddock, the horses are walking round. What are we looking for?
Okay, Matt, I think the first thing to look for is the horse's well-being.
Right.
Okay, general well-being. So for that, we want to look at the horse's coat. It's the easiest way of working.
What about this one here?
This horse here, he looks well in his coat, doesn't he? Look, he's got a nice, shiny, bright coat. No pimples or blemishes on him. He looks well. That's kind of what we're looking for. That type of horse, as opposed to one that looks dry and dull in his coat, which is a sign that they're not really at a peak and they want a bit more time.
Okay, what else are we looking for? If we look at the
temperament, Matt, I think temperament's something that's important. You don't want to see a horse walking around sweating or grinding its teeth or looking nervous, because obviously it's a sign of stress, and they'll be running the race before the race, if you know what I mean. See one horse walking around, ears pricked. Horse there looks a bit dull in its coat, you see, the 9 horse.
So when you say dull in its coat,
there's no shine on his coat, is there? He looks dull, doesn't he? He looks like he's just a little bit backward, you know, a little bit behind. Whereas the horse we saw earlier looked really nice and bright.
So compared to the one we've got round here, the 8, looks much better in its coat?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, it does to me. Doesn't it to you?
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Yeah, so it's common sense, really, isn't it? It's nothing really too complicated, really. I think it's overcomplicated often, to be honest. So, yeah, but temperament-wise, you just want to see a horse walking around with its ears nice and pricked, taking an interest in what's going on around it, but not being worried. That's the key, really.
So basically, I guess it's sometimes like us, where we can wake up in the morning, we look in the mirror, and you think, "Oh, my skin doesn't." You know, when you're eating right, your skin looks better, and it's the same with horses.
Absolutely right. I honestly think people overcomplicate it, and generally, it's just common sense, really. Fitness is the third thing, of course, and that's the hardest thing to gauge because they're all different makes and shapes and sizes, aren't they, and body types. So that's much more difficult to work out. But generally, you want a horse with a nice, big, well-muscled back end because that's their engine. That's where they do all the work. That's the power.
And what about this 7 here? This looks to me like it probably need a bit more time.
Exactly, and the horse behind him looks the opposite, doesn't he? He looks really fit. The 3 horse looks really revved up. Looks like he's going down early, so he's probably quite a keen type of horse, and a keen type of horse would tend to get itself fit anyway, you know.
So why would a horse go down early compared to the other with staying longer?
Because his horse probably pulls a bit hard in company, so if there's other horses going down with him, it will rev him up and he'll pull too hard, so he'll go down on his own nice and quietly, perhaps even walk down before the other jockeys have got on. So yeah, it's just a way of, you know, keeping the horse nice and calm, keeping the lid on him, so that when, you know, the stall's open, he's got plenty of gas in the tank, as we say that he's whipped round.
Yeah.
But
so it's a negative though, isn't it?
Negative, and all the signs of like sweating, grinding their teeth, all of those things are negatives, you know, all signs of stress and tension, which obviously you don't want to see.
So if there's an Andy Ayres top 3 things to look at around the paddock, what are they?
It would be a horse to be nice and relaxed in the prelims, to look nice and fit in terms of, as I say, well muscled up behind the saddle, and to go down nice and collected. I think it's really important to watch horses go to post. I say it's almost the most important thing for me, because if they don't act on the ground, they can't win the race. You know, the ground plays a massive, massive factor. So if you've got a horse with a light skimming action, you want quick ground like we've got today. If you've got a horse with a big poundy action, he'll want softer ground. So it's really important to watch the horses go to post. I think that's probably one of the most important factors for me personally.
Right, now what we're going to do here is, because you're sponsoring this race around the paddock with Andy Ayres, we've got to look at for the best turned out. Now, This is, I guess, slightly something a little bit different, where I guess you're looking to see.
Well, it's not with the best turned out. It wouldn't be looking at the best looking horse. It's a horse where the groom's done the most work, really, for me. And say you take this horse here, you know, she's bothered to plait the horse's mane, so he looks really nice. You can find one that would plait the mane and the tail, it'd be even better. Let's give it to the 10, because we said the 10 had a nice.
Okay, so the 10. So why are you giving best turned out to the 10?
Because she's plaited the horse's mane, hasn't she? The horse looks really well in itself. I think she's probably put a lot of effort in getting the horse ready for the race. So yeah, I'd say it's looks really well.
And it's a big deal for these stable staff, isn't it? Coming here, there's a £50 has been given by Value Rater for these today.
Tremendously hard, and yeah, they don't get the recognition they deserve, really.